Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Harper Presents event. This is the launch of Shamim Sarif's new YA novel, The Shadow Mission. This is the gripping sequel to the Athena Protocol, a feminist born identity that was recently shortlisted for the Canadian Children's Book Centre's John Spray Mystery Award. My name is Maeve. I work at HarperCollins as a publicist, and we are really pleased that you could join us for tonight's event. Though connected virtually, we would like to acknowledge that our meeting is hosted on Indigenous land and Dish with One Spoon territory. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. HarperCollins Canada gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin our event. The event will be about 45 minutes, and it will include a conversation between Shamim and interviewer Christy Tatong, followed by an audience Q&A. You can send your questions for Shamim using the Q&A function at the bottom center of your screens. We ask that you treat the presenter's work with respect and that your questions refrain from harassment of any sort, including but not limited to comments that are racist, homophobic, sexist, sexual, or threatening in nature. HarperCollins strives to provide an event environment that is welcoming and inclusive for both panelists and attendees. If you haven't yet had the chance, be sure to get your copy of The Shadow Mission or the Athena Protocol from the fabulous Another Story bookshop, who are co-hosting this event with us, by visiting anotherstory.ca. We also encourage you to share your virtual experience on social media with #HarperPresents. If you're interested in other virtual events like this one, you can visit harperpresents.ca. I'll be dropping all of those links into the chat for you. Now, to introduce our guest of honor this evening, Shamim Sarif. Shamim is a novelist, a screenwriter, and director. Her debut novel, The World Unseen, won a Betty Trask Award and the Pendleton May First Novel Award. She is also the author of Despite the Falling Snow and I Can't Think Straight. She has adapted and directed award-winning films of all three of these novels. She splits her time between the UK and Canada with her wife, Hanan, and their two sons. Really excited to have you here, Shamim.
Thank you. I feel like I appeared a bit too early, but there you go.
No, you were perfect. And finally, I'm just going to introduce you to our interviewer, Christy Tatong. Christy is a documentary filmmaker living with her family in Toronto. She met Shamim 2 decades ago while living and working in London with her husband. Their friendship was born instantly over Shamim's famous chocolate lava cakes and amazing conversation in the Sarif Katan household, which she calls the most hospitable corner of London that there ever does, or ever was, excuse me. Take it away, Christy.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Maeve, for your introduction. Hi, Shamim.
Hello, Christy. It's, I have to write a book for us to catch up, but it's...
I know, and you're so close, but yet so far. You're in Manitoba right now, is that right?
That is absolutely right. I mean, I'm just having a day off from shooting a movie here, so this all worked out really well.
At least we're in the same time zone.
Yeah, more or less.
Right. So anyway, thank you everyone else for being here. And for those of you who came to Shamim's last book launch of the first novel in the series called The Athena Protocol, you might remember that it was in a fancy bookshop with drinks and appetizers. It was quite fancy. This is not that, but it's actually better because I don't know about you, but you could be wearing track pants. Everyone else can be like cuddled up on the couch with a bowl of cereal, and that is actually my perfect evening. Much better than going out. So hope you all enjoy having Shamim inside your own house. So that was a year ago, right? You wrote a book, and your launch for the Athena Protocol was 1 year ago. What took you so long to write one more?
I know. You know what? I must be slacking somewhere along the way. I'm really sorry.
Okay, that's a joke because Shamim is probably the hardest worker that I know. Not only did she write a book in a year, but she also directed a bunch of very famous television episodes, as well as this film that she's directing right now in Winnipeg, as well as got all the funding and everything together for her own film called Polaroid, which hopefully will be shooting fairly soon. So I don't know how you do it, to be honest, especially during this time in the world right now, but you certainly aren't slacking. So congratulations. And I'd like to show you, this is a flashback. This is when we first met. You were working on this book, which won those 2 awards and then went on to become an award-winning film that premiered here in Toronto at TIFF. So pretty impressive, young
Well,
lady.
thank you. And my check is in the mail.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what? It's just, I think it's just like a really, it's when we were doing The World Unseen, when first of all the book and then the film, it was a very different landscape in film and TV, and not so much in book publishing, but a little bit, you know, that sense of having lead characters who were women of color, sometimes LGBTQI+, was not a, you know, very exciting commercial prospect for people. So now that has shifted over the past couple of years and is continuing to shift, you know, I figure I might as well do as much as I can. And you know, I live with my producer, so there's not much downtime if I know what's good for me.
That's right. She cracks that whip. Hi, Hanan. I'm sure you were there in London. You've probably stayed up well past your bedtime to join this, but hi, we miss you.
Yeah, and those are the flowers that I got this morning from.
Aw, very sweet. Speaking about the diversity, I mean, we should be at a place in our world where we don't even mention this. They're just stories, right? But you've been doing this for over 2 decades now. And it is a big deal. I mean, you center your stories, your protagonists of your stories are from very globally diverse and all sorts of backgrounds and sexual orientations, and you know, like they represent the world that we live in. And you're not asking for permission. You never did. When I met you 20 years ago, this is what you were doing. The world finally caught up with you, but it's still an important thing for you to do, and for the world to see more of these stories, and to just sort of normalize, like, yes, these are women and they're also spies. Like, let's just talk about that for a second, you know, because we're used to seeing these kind of macho single male story, you know, solo males running around the world in these spy thrillers or action movies. But this is a group of women. Of course, you've got like a main character in Jessie, but this is a group of diverse women that cooperate together. Can you speak to that a little bit and tell me why that's so important to you?
Sure. I mean, for me, it was exactly that. I think what I've always looked for is to represent what I couldn't find in stories when I was growing up. And for me, that representation of women, diverse women, is so important. I mean, it's, as you said, it's not a tiny minority of the world. It's actually a slight majority. So and I think that representation has taken way too long to catch up. Why it's important, I think, because storytelling is important at its core. You know, of course, I live and die by this, but you know, it's, for me, storytelling is kind of a way for us to explore our humanity, what it is to be human, what it is to navigate our way through the ups and downs and challenges that life throws at you, whether they're through your family, your work, your politics. You know, there are women who are living in parts of the world where they do not have basic human rights or access to voting and basic things. So all of that is the function, I believe, of storytelling and of art to talk about and to bring to the table to discuss. And having, as you said, having done that over a period of time, I thought, okay, what is the next big thing that we're not seeing women represented in? And yeah, I think spy thrillers very much so. We have Charlie's Angels, we have more and more now of you know, interesting women in action, but really it was, for me, a story about women taking back power in a world where, with some of our governments and some of our leaders, who we don't have to name on this call, but we know who they are, that power is not being given to us for nothing. We have to reach out and take it. So the Athena agency is a heightened way that women have said, okay, we're going to run a rogue agency. It's very much real world. We have to stay under the radar, but we're going to deal with trafficking. We're going to deal with people who are against women's education in the shadow mission, and take that power back for ourselves. So it's a heightened way to do it, but I think it's very important for all of us, whether it's just making that vote, whether it's standing up for what we believe in, because it seems to me like the world is at a tipping point right now. And you know, they used to say all that's needed is for good men to say nothing. I totally agree with that, but I think that needs to be expanded to good women, because there's a time for women to have a voice now more than ever in order to keep hold of the strides that have been made, whether it's Roe versus Wade, all the way through to being able to drive in Saudi. You know, there are challenges all over the world that women need to try to put their voices towards.
So let's back up and talk a little bit, like just give a little synopsis of your Athena protocol, and then forward to today in the Shadow Mission. The Athena protocol story follows Jessie, who's a young spy and part of the secret rogue agency that takes it on themselves to do this vigilante sort of work. And what they do is interrupt a human trafficking ring in West Africa and follow it to Belgrade and take down the nasty kingpin. So the next one, which starts in Pakistan and moves to Mumbai and London, begins with a deadly attack on a girls' school by an evil far-right group. So, you know, even though it's like, it's a breathless page turner and it's funny and it's witty and it's even a tearjerker, and I couldn't literally put it down. The topic about girls, like you're talking about women, but what was it about telling the story of school-age girls that made you want to write this book? Like there must have been, well, I mean, there's probably stories that you've heard all over the world. You've got so many super fans besides me. But what made you take on the actual topic of school-age girls and what they're up against and what they're being, you know, what they have to fight against?
Sure, a couple of things, and I think something I became aware of, you know, in the last year or two, was that when people are when children are pulled out of education, it's often girls that are the first to suffer under that, and it's often girls who are not given the education to start with. And that's something that also I was discussing recently after I wrote the book with Rebecca Tomley of Headwaters Relief, because we have a partnership with Headwaters on these books. And that's something that she found in Nepal, for example, after the COVID epidemic, is that girls were disproportionately being pulled out of education and suffering. On a personal level, I spent a lot of time in India, and I have met young women there, specifically when I was at TED India some years ago. There was a fan of I Can't Think Straight in the World Unseen who made her way by train all the way to the Emphasis campus where TED was being held. And she said, I will wait outside if I need to see you. I mean, it was an incredibly humbling process. So Hanan and I met with her and her friend outside the campus when we finished. And she and her friend were from the Dalit untouchable caste in India. And they had been pushed into, or she had been pushed into an arranged marriage when she was very young. She was gay, lesbian, and did not want to be in that marriage, but had not even the vocabulary to describe to her parents what that situation was, and definitely no cultural ability to stand up for her rights in that regard. But eventually I heard back from her a few years later, and she had pulled herself out of that situation and had actually started LGBT reading groups all throughout India. Groups. So that again brought home to me the power of, because I think she felt from seeing herself represented in stories that was an important step for her, and believing that it could happen for her as well. So I think that story stayed with me, and I think that the fact that girls get educated rather than being pushed into marriages that they can't possibly be, agreeing to be in on any meaningful level when you're 13, 14, 15. And it's a huge, huge issue in India and many parts of the world, was something that was very dear to my heart, because these are young girls who don't get a chance to decide or think about what they want for their lives. It's decided for them.
And I mean, she's just one of many thousands. If you look at your Facebook page, you've got 47,000 followers. Yeah. And many, many of those are women around the world who feel emboldened by your work to live their truth, or maybe are not emboldened, but look at you as a beacon of hope. The steps that you and Hanan have taken in your lives, with no small cost to yourselves. These women are taking steps in a direction despite their families and culture and religions trying to stop them. but just as purely feminist fiction, it is a rollicking good read. And you could, it's not only feminist fiction. It's not just for women. It's Jason Bourne, but more nuanced and more cooperative and smarter, I think, and full of complexity. Your character, Jessie, she's smart and she's funny and flinty, but she also has great vulnerability, and she also has conflicted feelings a lot of the time, just like the rest of us. Can you talk a little bit about creating that character of Jessie, and,
Sure.
and who may have inspired you, or how you come about with that?
Sure. I think, I think having two, they're not teenagers anymore, 21 and nearly 18, two boys of my own sort of gave me a little bit of insight, even though they think I have none, into their, reminding myself of what it was to be a teenager again. A lot of my own experience went into that because, when I was Jessie's age, I had a lot of conflicting feelings inside me about various things, about wanting to be a writer, about being LGBTQ and not feeling comfortable expressing that within the family situation, and that hesitation, unfortunately, was borne out in the experience that came after that for many years. But all of that kind of played into the vulnerability that Jessie has, and really, as a storyteller, I don't like to see any action or traditionally heroic figures who have no arc. I think it's like if they start out heroic, it's kind of the Mission Impossible of it all. It only relies on the stunts in the end of the day because, Ethan Hunt is who he is at the beginning and then he's the same guy at the end, more or less. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, what if you had these amazing skills? You could go out, you could take on somebody in a one-to-one fight. You could be an incredible sniper. You could know how to hack into stuff and find out what you need to know. But when you get home at night, you just don't know how to deal with your mom, or you feel lonely, or you can't tell anybody actually what you do for a living. That's the reality of being a secret spy. So for me, the Athena Protocol and the Shadow Mission were 50% about dealing with that side of it, as well as the actual plot twists and turns.
And about the plot twists and turns, I mean, this is like a very technical story with like a lot of very technical topics, like from, diffusing bombs and sort of internet savvy stuff. How did you do your research, and also dystopian medical stuff without giving any spoilers away? How did you go about all that research? Did you actually talk to specialists in their fields, or did you just watch a lot of YouTube videos on how to hack like all these crazy military systems, or what did you do?
Well, Christy, I am actually a secret agent. No, I did both of those things. There was definitely a lot of interesting how-to on YouTube that made me wonder if I'm going to have the CIA or MI5 knocking on my door to arrest me at some point, based on my browser history. But a lot of that was experts that I talked to, especially on the medical side of it, on the virus side of it, on the bomb disposal as well. Because it's almost like we've seen everything there is to see. So I'm always looking for a twist that we can work on there. So yeah, definitely a ton of research, and I think getting the plot to work the way I wanted it to do was almost the hardest thing for me to get right, because I knew the framework of the character arcs that I wanted to run for each of the characters. So then it was a matter of making sure those two meshed together.
That's really interesting. Like you prioritized the character arcs first, and then you came up with the storyline. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, because I get bored if the characters are not growing in some way.
Well, speaking about the subject matter, without giving any spoilers, but I read this book in 2 days. It was so riveting, and literally I could not put it down. I literally fell asleep, and that's why it took 2 days instead of 1. But only because, I have to be asleep by 11. But at the beginning, I felt grateful to have such an escapist story to throw myself into that took me out of the real world that we're living through today, which is crazy. And And then about halfway through I thought, hold on a sec, like the parallels in this story to the crazy world that we're living through right now are phenomenal. And yet a lot of those plot points that you probably planned, you did before some of these parallels actually kind of snuck up on us, right? So let me just say that, you know, the story follows malevolent acts by a far-right faction in a corrupt patriarchal system with the complicity of shady banks and military. So, I mean, pick a bunch of spots in the world today.
Which country doesn't sound like that?
I don't know, but there's one south of us, and I don't mind saying which one it is.
Right.
You know, like these things are so relevant today, and yet you probably planned all of these details far before like these things happened over here.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I hope it's not giving too much away to say there is a medical viral aspect to this. And that for me was a bit terrifying when that happened in, you know, February, March this year, because I delivered this novel sort of, I think November, December last year.
Did you bring it on?
Oh God, no, please don't say that. No, I'd like to think that I didn't.
Oh my gosh, what was that?
It's just like we're talking about bombs and things. It's Winnipeg. It has to be thunder.
Oh my gosh, that was a thunderbolt. Okay.
Yeah.
But you couldn't have guessed how parallel, like reading it today, right? I just felt like, oh, she must have just written this a week ago.
Yeah, it did feel like that, I have to say. And as I was skimming through it before we were doing this, because it's been that long since I read it, I was actually quite horrified. But in a way, it's like it's so timely that I think great that it's hitting bookshelves now and not in a year from now. Because for whatever that's worth, for whoever reads it, I really hope that it inspires some kind of social change. You know, for me, look, at the end of the day, I don't ever want to write something that's just there to preach or to put a point across. It has to be entertaining. It has to be, you know, ideally gripping because of the characters and the plot. But beyond that, I think there's always, as you know, a social justice element to everything that I write. So I was really, I'm not happy the way things are going, but I'm happy that the book is out there right now.
Yeah, it couldn't be better timed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here's a question for you then. Do you find, is it kind of therapeutic for you to write these narratives where the bad guys get taken down?
Oh my God.
Like, and justice, which is elusive in our real world, you know, this group of women can exact on these evil empires or...
Totally. You know, it's therapeutic, and it's also kind of wish fulfillment, because there's a point where, you know, I mean, yesterday again, it was just like I've controlled myself on Twitter or whatever, and I cut and paste the, you know, the Trump gets out of hospital and infects everybody, and I had, you know, some choice epithets put up there, and I thought, what is the point? All that's doing is putting more focus back on him, back on, you know, the things that we don't want to see in our world, the behavior we don't want to see. So I think really, as I get older, I find it easier to hold back on that stuff and try to put out there the things that we do want to see. Let's just promote well, it was thunder, not like I've ever seen very often, but there's a massive thunderstorm now. But yeah, I think it's a matter of putting your focus on what is the world that we want to see, and how do we want to see that run, and taking, because I think it sucks some of the energy out of the stuff that we don't want to see. So for me, creating characters who are totally focused on that, and who care about each other as well, because I think part of that working together is, it's so important that people check in with each other. Like, you know, I imagine Joe Biden and Kamala Harris kind of ask each other how they are when they chat, you know, and it's like we do with our friends, with our family. There's that kind of aspect of these women caring about each other and trying to support each other through the trauma of the trials of the work that they do every day in the shadow mission, because what they undergo is pretty traumatic on many levels. It's not easy to defuse a bomb. It's not easy to fail sometimes, which they also do during this book. And it's the aftermath of that which is also very important to me to examine, in the ways that we care about each other in a world which seems at the top levels of government more and more uncaring.
Mm-hmm. And not only that they try and they fail sometimes, but your books always deal with what can't be unseen, right? So these women, they go out and they see some pretty traumatic stuff and they try to right the wrongs, but those experiences live indelibly within us. Whatever we experience and whatever we see, that can't be undone, right? So it changes us. And the women in your books are always so compassionate and cooperative, and they listen to each other. I mean, they have their arguments as well. Like, let's not kid ourselves. It's reality, but they show women's relationships and cooperation as being a powerful tool, right? Like, it's not just one person against the world. It's people coming together and using their different talents and uplifting each other that gets the job done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly, I don't think anybody who's got a certain amount of life experience and a certain amount of intelligence in the way they try to approach stuff that doesn't realize that's the only way that things can work, whether it's in government or anywhere else. So I guess what the Athena Protocol and what the Shadow Mission is saying is that we don't have to wait for the government to do it for us or to change, because if we do, we could lose another 4 years, or we could lose the rest of our lives, depending on how things go. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. But, it's just, and now more than ever, I think when I remember 10, 15 years ago, we all felt kind of relaxed about it. If you were kind of liberal, social justice-y, middle of the road in your politics, or even left-wing in your politics, you didn't really have to do very much. You just kind of supported the status quo. But now is like a time when having even what I consider to be moderate views is not you're not being represented. So I think it's very, very, very important for and not just women and men, because this fight is not for women alone. It's for all of us together. But I focus on women because traditionally they have not had the same voice as men. They've been taught, as we all have been along the way, that we kind of defer to our husbands and fathers and whatever, even in the most gentle way imaginable. And that time is now passing, and it's time for everybody to kind of step up and say what they believe in.
But not only that, they have different kinds of voices and different viewpoints on these issues. So
yeah,
look at the world leaders in I saw something yesterday in the on Facebook or something, where it showed the leaders that have the worst cases of COVID and the women, the young women across the world who have shepherded their countries through, to some sense of safety.
And that doesn't have to be the simple divide, but right now it's a very clear issue. And I think that's another good point, is that the idea in the Shadow Mission is that these women are not averse to taking advice. They're not averse to admitting if they're wrong or thinking about it if they're wrong. And that process of consultation and trying to be better people, as well as just make it a better world, is always interesting, because I think when you, as a mother, as a wife, as a somebody directing a film, you have 100 people relying on you. I think you have to start to improve. I've had to improve my ability to communicate, my who I am as a person. You cannot be short-tempered, which is always a big failing of mine growing up and well into my adulthood. So you try to kind of improve your ability as a person, I guess. So that was again something that I explored in the Athena Protocol, and often Jessie's failings in that are very much mine. So that's another inspiration.
Well, I see her wit in yours as well. So I recognize part. Here's a question about your craft. And, I'm a filmmaker and I'm editing a film right now and I'm writing it. And I find that my hyper focus zone has gone from here to here with, the pandemic and all these things going on. It's hard to stay super motivated sometimes. And how has COVID affected your day-to-day? What is your discipline, your writing discipline, and has it actually taken a hit from everything that's going on in the world, or has that helped in a way?
Well, yes, here's what I was in Canada when COVID hit, and actually starting to direct this film, which got put on hold, and I flew home and I had a complete nervous breakdown for a day, and I said to Hanan, this is just terrible and I can't work, and this pandemic, and how am I going to work? And she just turned around and said, well, what would you be doing differently than what you do every day, which is get up, go to your cabin and sit there and write. You're very lucky. You don't have the same issues of everybody else. So stop whining and get out there. So by the second day, I was pretty much over it.
Oh, wow. Good.
It's also, well, you have two kids who are younger than ours, and I know my sister's out there. She thought a bunch of people who are on this call have very young kids, and they have been home with them during the pandemic, and that's a whole different thing. That's juggling childcare and work, and I haven't had that. Luca is at home and he's turning 18, so half the time, if we're on WhatsApp, he doesn't even know where I am, just that I'm there. so I'm a lot luckier. It's just the stage of life that I'm in has given me that freedom to use this quiet time to write.
Right. But can we just say, like, when you wrote this, you had a toddler, so let's not.
That was hellishly difficult. I will admit.
Yeah.
I've been through those years, yeah. But it's kind of low-level anxiety with this pandemic, of course, all the time. And I just encourage everybody that I can speak to try to, just put their focus on what's good in the world, wherever you can, at least even if it's a few minutes a day, and not immerse in the news, because I truly believe that focus helps shift something.
Right. I mean, otherwise it's a mucky sinkhole that you can wallow in for quite a long time, isn't it? Speaking of Hanan, let's just give a shout out to your wonderful wife and creative partner. She produces your films, and she is a motivator and possibly a muse and an inspiration. Your acknowledgement of Hanan at the back of your book, in this last book, The Mission, Shadow Mission, it mentions your great gratitude, even if the shifting of her red pen across your pages made you want to weep at the time. So let's just talk about Hanan's role as editor, as I don't know, sounding board. What can you explain?
I think all of that and more, and that's a great gift for any writer to have, because it's rare. When I'm in the early stages of something, I've learned not to share those early drafts with too many people, because I'm always in love with them, and then afterwards I go back and I went, oh my god, what was I thinking? But I will always give Hanan pages as they are being written, because she is kind of tough on me, if they're not working, and she's my greatest cheerleader when she thinks they are. That red pen thing is just when, sometimes I'm like a farmer. I can go to sleep at 9 o'clock every night, and she likes to be up late. So, it's nothing worse than waking up and seeing somebody going like, and I'm like, what are you circling? So it drives me a little bit crazy. But I will give a shout out to my amazing editor as well, Tara Wakeham at HarperCollins, because she got a draft of this book that I thought was a genius thing, and she helped whip it into shape and gave me a lot more work to do. But I think it really lifted the book to the level that we both wanted.
And this is my last question, then we'll put it out to the crowd. Who is your ideal reader? I mean, I wouldn't dare pigeonhole this book into, oh, this is for young readers, or this is for women readers, or this is for, I never really read spy thrillers. So who is your reader? Who is your audience?
I know that my audience right now is primarily women, and often diverse women. I would also say, but for this, honestly, this book, my greatest happiness would be for it to reach a lot of young readers and young men and women, and men who read spy thrillers, because I think if the plot holds up, that would be enough to get them through. And I just think that representation of seeing women in those roles is just useful to stretch everybody's mind about what women can be and do in the world. So how was that for a cop-out? Anyone and everyone?
No, that's not it. That's exactly what I believe, though. I mean, it's I think, in some of the promotional stuff, if it says it's a feminist, I don't know, some people might not think, oh, that's not for me. Well, yeah, it is actually. It's just like a fantastic, rollicking ride. It is absolutely fantastic page turner, and it's a spy thrilling, you know, action film, but to appeal to me, because that's not usually my genre, but I absolutely loved every page of it, and it's complex and nuanced, and it's got these amazing friendships and a bit of romance and wit. So it's congratulations on
Thank you.
on the
I
second
agree.
of your series.
Huge amount coming from you, Christy. And a final shout out to Juliet Hagopian, who's producing the film that I'm doing right now, and she sent over these beautiful posters for me to put behind here, which I'm just going to carry around with me everywhere I go from tomorrow on set.
Thanks so much, Christy, for those amazing questions and your very thoughtful answers, Shamim. We do have quite a few questions that have come from the audience, so I'll run through these. A few people are very curious as to whether or not we're going to be seeing these characters on the screen anytime soon. They said, move over James Bond.
Well, that would be nice. We have, Hanan and I have made a deal in which we are working alongside Village Roadshow, the studio, and Grand Via, the production company who did Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Rubbish TV, but you know, there you go. I mean, we're so thrilled to be working with people of this caliber. So our process now is to just, I'm working on a pitch deck, and we're looking for people to work with me on doing a show for TV. So I think what we're trying to do is we're leaning more towards television at the moment because of the, I think, chaotic state of the cinema world, but also because I think the character-driven nature of the story with 6 women, I think would lend itself for me beautifully to TV, to being able to extrapolate these characters over a much longer arc and to get really deep into their personal lives. So
I agree. That sounds very exciting. I think we're all looking very much forward to that.
Thank you.
Claudia is wondering if when you were writing the Athena Protocol, was part of your story thinking at some point about a sequel?
Claudia, hi. Yes, it was. And that was partly because I had the 2-book deal, but, but seriously, it was because I think I had so many different social justice issues that I thought would be amazing for the Athena team to deal with. So it was almost hard to narrow it down initially to what to choose for the first 2. So yeah, definitely it was really based around that and around the fact that I kind of had an idea for Jessie to go from being really immature with lessons to learn to somebody who's potentially more of a leader at the end of Athena, and then at the end of Shadow Mission, another significant shift in her worldview. So yeah, I think it was always on my horizon, and I have ideas for more, just not the time at the moment.
Simran is wondering, what are the central strengths you think that Jessie brings as a female character as opposed to if she were written as a male?
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jessie's vulnerability is important. I think that my experience of having teenage boys is that when they are vulnerable, they don't want to show it as much, you know, and there's a lot of kind of, you know, no, I can do this, I can do that. And I think with Jessie, she feels very uncertain about her relationship with her mom.
Mm-hmm.
She's very uncertain about her sexuality, not because she's worried about coming out. Her mom is a rock star and she's pretty cool with that, but it's actually just not being certain about how the women that she might be attracted to feel about her, and all of those things that, you know, when we're young, we feel, right? So there's all of that kind of uncertainty that I think was easier for me to put into the mouth of a teenage or young woman rather than a young man.
Good answer. Tommy is wondering how you decide on what you write about, where these ideas come from.
Honestly, I think it generally comes, I get an idea for a character first. For these particular books, they were, you know, with the Shadow Mission, I think it came from being in India and seeing a lot of the issues that young women have in India, particularly outside the major cities. But also from being this particular thing, from going to TED conferences and realizing that that there was a lot of power coming out of people like Bill Gates, who have some money, they have some influence, and they have the choice to decide where to spend that money and what they're going to do to help the world. So I thought about that in context of these three women who run Athena. What if they decided to focus on women's issues?
Cheryl is wondering, she said she's always wanted to write. She has many ideas. She was wondering if it's possible to have someone write a story when you tell it to them, or how does one go about getting from the idea stage to the actual book stage? So are there people out there who can make sense of your idea and help you write it? And I think this is probably a question for you as a writer.
I tried that. I tried waking Hanan up in the middle of the night.
Can you write this?
And that never worked for me. So, you know, that's not a process I can speak to, because for me, it's always come from my writing process. But, you know, there may well be. There are a lot of people who love writing and are looking for ideas. So I would just say, get out there and put that wish out there on the internet and see who comes back.
I think that's good advice. So two things from Lisa. One of them, she was asking if there were going to be autographed copies available. And I did write this in the chat. There are autographed copies available from Another Story bookshop. Shamim wonderfully signed some book plates for us. So if you do order a copy from that store, I dropped the link in the chat. That book will come signed, which is very exciting.
Right.
Lisa's other question was, she wanted to know how you transition from one type of story to the other. That you're writing about. So how do you find the motivation as to what will be your staple as to the type of story that you will tell, just sort of as far as plot goes? So moving from one to the other, how do you do that?
Usually there's enough of a time lag, because it feels like it's very quick, but you know, the publishing process takes that long, that
yeah.
there's that space for me to start thinking about new ideas and new stories. And honestly, I think it's just maintaining a sense of curiosity. And I think the world is never endingly surprising to me, and what the strange things that happen in real life. And it's often trying to fictionalize them in a way that sounds like reality. Sometimes it's toning them down. So it's not about watching the news as much as just staying, for me, I read the New York Times backwards. So it's culture and technology and business and stuff like that. And often from things like that, I'll begin to spark ideas that I'll write down, and then come back to at a later date.
Ellie is, she says, firstly, you are such an inspiration. And then she says, do you prefer writing or directing? And how do you find the transition from your books to the screen?
Well, that's not a cop-out to say I really love both of them. And usually by the time I'm finished directing, I'm really longing to go back to writing and vice versa, because they're very different worlds. So I think the transition with writing is that you're creating that entire world. The Shadow Mission is something that the look, the feel, the characters, the plot, what they wear, what they eat, how they deal with stuff is entirely up to me to put onto the page, and then hopefully for the reader to bring their perspective into it. With a movie that I'm directing, I'm working off a screenplay that I've written, but still that it's just a blueprint. So now I'm asking a production designer, the actors, particularly the director of photography, to be part of that collaboration with me. And, you know, with all the actors that I've been lucky enough to work with, including Lisa, Sheetal, Rebecca, they just, and Stephanie now on this movie, Stephanie March, they've all been able to bring something that I would not have imagined for the characters that I was writing. And that for me is such a gift, and it's a thrill to see that happening. So I love that part of it, but it's a lot of people management, which is not what writers are famously good for, Jen.
So Maureen sent a question through. She said, now that you're in Canada more, do you think that maybe Athena would pick up on the missing and murdered Indigenous women? If you were going to turn this into a TV series, would that maybe be a plot line that you would pursue?
I think that could very much be a plot line. And I think that aspect of missing, of murdered, of not cared about, of being ignored is something certainly that will, wherever it's set, if it was in Canada, I think it would unfortunately ring bells in so many places all over the world. So yes, I think that's very much front of my mind for storyline. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Wendy, we got a few. I'm just going to read you these because they're really nice. So a few people have just sort of written about how much they love you and they love your work.
That's just
So Deepthi says, hello, Shamim. Thank you for bringing all of this beautiful work to us. You inspire me. I am, of course, eager to get my hands on this beyond a page turner. I love the way you knit your characters. Thank you so much to you. And a big hello to Hanan, love from India. And she said, it's a great morning now. It's morning there. So
that is really
good way to start the day. And then Wendy said she's so thankful for your books and movies. She's in the middle of life. She grew up in the Bible Belt, and she was often encouraged to not be herself there. So she has overcome her fear of judgment, and it's because of people like you who shine a light through literature and cinema. So she says, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Wendy. And I would just tell you it's actually because of you and because of what, I'm just happy if all these books and movies could have helped in a tiny, tiny way. Thank you.
Here's one more question from Nancy, who says, do you allow super fans as extras in your movies? She's asking for a friend.
That's Nancy Newman. Removed from this chat immediately. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, we do allow super fans as extras, Nancy. So
good.
Get yourself to Winnipeg and I can still fit you in this week. So.
Okay, so those were our questions. Thank you so much, both of you. What a great chat and just such a fun evening. I just want to remind everybody that you can visit anotherstory.ca to purchase a copy of The Shadow Mission or the Athena Protocol. And again, those are signed copies. We do have book plates for those. If you are interested in attending future virtual author events, please visit our Harper Presents listing page at harperpresents.ca. I did drop all those links for you in the chat. And thank you again, everyone, and congratulations to Shamim. Thank you, Christy. It's very exciting book launch and a week left of shooting for you. And it's been great having you here in Canada.
Thank you to you, Maeve, and to HarperCollins for organizing this, to Another Story for organizing the signed copies, Christy G for doing this 2 years in a row. I think you deserve a medal by now.
She's a great interviewer.
So hang out with everybody.
As long as I get to talk to you, that's all I care about.
Well, thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it, and it's just lovely to see all these wonderful friends. And
well, I'm going to share this chat with you afterwards, Shamim, so you can see, because there's lots of great comments happening in here too. Thank you again, everybody, for your participation tonight, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.